Let's start this afternoon off with a prayer. Would you pray with me? Father, we are so grateful for the opportunity to be with your people, to think out ways you've called us into leadership, to explore new possibilities. Father, I thank you for all of those who are present today and pray your blessing upon them as they lead and as they follow in various settings. Father, help us to be faithful to you today. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen. This was a few years ago. This is from the Barna study. The Barna group does a lot of sociological study about church life in the U.S. And so this is from the United States, but it basically says that ministers are going in and out of pulpits. And again, in your particular social setting, it might be different, but they're going in and out every 4 years or so. Problem with that is that it takes about 7 years to actually build up the kind of clout, influence, connectivity to actually get something done. For example, college presidents, by the way, are pretty short-lived too. A lot of stress in the job, a lot of living in moments where, by the way, this is true of all leadership, living, living when you can't do anything, learning how to make sense of that time. All you can do is just your faithfulness is being there. That's about all you can figure out to do. But anyway, it takes about 7 years. I'm moving into my 8th year as the leader of Alberta Bible College. And it's only now that I've got enough clout to actually deal with the folks that were kind of the folks who were just kind of a constant noise in my ear. I can actually deal with those folks now because I know what makes them tick. So they don't make me near as anxious as they used to, you know. So, but it takes time to build relationships. In fact, whether we're dealing with a nonprofit organization or a church, we're dealing with something that the longer we work together, the more we read each other, the more we come into sync with one another, so to speak. So I want to talk to you about transitions because we live in a time right now. I'm going to move us down the slideshow just a little because I want to get to a particular point. And I'll come back. Good stuff. No, we'll just keep moving forward. I'm going to use ministerial transition as a model for all kinds of transitions, you know. But transitions are those interesting places where we live. We're not quite out of the old. We're not quite into the new. And I don't know about you, but this post-COVID, I'm feeling that now as we're moving out of this stuff. Have you guys experienced, and maybe this is just me, it seems harder to do things that we used to do pretty easily before. It's harder to pull people together. One thing that we're experiencing, again, I don't know if this is true for you, is one thing we're experiencing in the churches that I've been among is that the pool of volunteers lower than it used to be. And for some of us, the attendance on a regular basis is lower than it used to be. Now, some of you may be experiencing, because I know of a couple of churches that are actually doing really fine right now, coming out because their people want to be together. So I think we're all experiencing it somewhat different, but we're going through transitions that we've never gone through before. For example, I've got a group of students who do the college programming. There's about 27 students who do kind of a day college program, typical semester programming. 90% of them come to class. So only about 10% are still using the Zoom option, which we've made available because if you get sick, you're going to be out a couple of weeks, and so it keeps students on track more. Our adult learners, which is largely our PACE program, we call it, which the nonprofit is part of, we do most of those classes on a Tuesday night. 87% of those students prefer to come in on Zoom. Almost the very opposite of the daytime college program. And the reason being, I think, is that COVID taught us that through Zoom, we could save 20 minutes or an hour driving to class and driving home, particularly since the class ends at 10. And so, and now that gasoline's more expensive, rent's more expensive, I've got students, my adult learners are trying to find ways to save money to survive. So we're still in a time of transition. But I want to use ministerial transition as a way of talking about, let's say you brought in a new minister, new CEO. You could any kind of new leadership role. We can put it with anything. There are 6 things that they need to negotiate on their way in. Sometimes we expect a new preacher or a new leader to come in and immediately start leading at the power of full throttle. Not going to happen. And so this is a way of leave taking. That is, leaving the last place should take at least a year. If you talk somebody into coming to you, they left last month and they're working for you now, all I can say is get ready. They'll do it to you too. It takes, to leave well, it takes an intentional year, in my opinion. It can be longer, shorter. I'm not making science out of this. But the reason for that is to leave well, you've got to leave handing the baton off very well. Even if it's not to another minister, it's to at least the elder group that brought you in or the board that brought you in. So leave taking, and then there's entry, actually showing up, moving into the house, whatever that. For a lot of us, that involves immigration stuff. So it can be quite complicated depending on. The next thing is startup. How long? When you're the new person in the office, you don't even know where the staples are. I mean, you got to learn everything. The paper clips, you know. How do you use the phone if you've got any fancy phone equipment, right? And then there's mutual testing. This is the phase where the leaders begin to figure out how can they work together, or if they can work together. And it's actually a bit of a power contest. There comes a time in which there is mutual acceptance. If there's not mutual acceptance, there's another exit. You know that, right? Okay. And then there is mission and ministry. And I would say that when you bring a new person into a system, you're talking a year or 2 years before they're actually performing at a high level. One of the hardest positions to fill in, say, my world, I could really use an advancement officer. The advancement officer is the person who goes out and asks for money. You can imagine that's a hard job. It takes you 2 years. This is on my reckoning, having been in this business a while. It takes 2 years to figure out if the person can actually do it. And if they can't, you're 2 years down the road with the wrong person in the job. So transitions are not easy by any means. So I've got slides that basically walk through the various steps here. I'm going to leave those slides for you later. They'll be sent to you. If I've got your email address, you will get a copy of the slides. Okay? Anybody got any question about how to, so for a new person coming into a leadership role, there's 6 things to think about. All right? How to leave, how to enter, start up 3 or 4 months maybe. Because if you're a new minister, you've got to figure out who the members are. Your first year, by the way, at any new ministry should be about getting to know not necessarily the context that the church is in, although you have to learn that kind of simultaneously, but you really have to learn who the church is or the nonprofit or whatever it is you're leading. So, you guys understand the mutual testing? Or you need some clarification for what that means? Yeah, let me move into that. Ministers don't automatically, if they're working with an elder board, don't automatically assume they've got power to do things. You know, so-and-so calls you up and they want you to do something in the name of the church. Is that a decision you can make on your own? Or is that a decision that needs to go by the board? And so you've got the mutual, so there's a bit of a mutual contest. And by the way, the minister who's there a long time will have more authority than the minister who's there for a short time, for natural reasons. You build it and you learn what belongs to whom. But there's a little, in fact, what's interesting is you don't know that you violated it until you violated it. And you usually have to talk about it because there's no way for us to be clear about everything, you know. Or churches will naturally assume that what their last pastor did is what the new pastor thinks they can do. So that's what that's about. What I've got in the next slides is just an explanation of all of it. So what I want to do is I want to get to, yeah.
In the business, is that what they call the onboarding process?
Onboarding, yeah. Yeah, we need, there's several levels we need to get better at onboarding. We need to onboard new members.
Yes.
We need to onboard leaders. We need to onboard elders. Leaders, I was talking about staff leaders. Elders are leaders, of course, too. But we've got to do a better job of onboarding that. I think every church needs a place for new members or those thinking about being new members. Not only hear kind of a shortened form of the gospel we preach, but they also need a short history. You don't want to do a lot of this, but they need a history of the group that they've come to be a part of. Knowing something of the story of the church explains a lot of stuff about, oh, this is kind of why this church, this is why we hear this name. So, because these folks helped started the church and all of that kind of stuff. So,
I guess that's very important, and I hope and I wish that we could expand a little bit more on that, because one of the main problems of many churches, even the established ones, is that particular problem of onboarding process.
Yeah.
And they're just kind of like surprised that, oh, you shouldn't do that. Oh, you offended this leader because, like what you said, he doesn't like that pot to be removed from that spot.
that's right. That's right.
So during the onboarding process,
Uh-huh.
at least there will be some kind of quote unquote orientation for both
That's right.
sides.
That's right. Well, and the other side about onboarding is that you get somebody you can ask questions. You create it's okay to ask questions if you don't get something. Yeah, we need to make it okay to ask questions and to check things. Yeah, no, I think all of that's really good. Yeah.
Well, that's a good one because maybe we can create a template to that effect so that transition they're ready to use.
Yep. Do you guys find this could be interesting as an onboarding question? Onboarding somebody from the Philippines who doesn't do English really well versus your second generation folks who are growing up in Canada. Those are two very different worlds, and the needs are very different. And I'm not convinced that a single church can probably do both. I don't know. I've talked with Roger Marcos there in Ontario at North York about this too, because only recently have they moved to having an English only service. Although it's kind of funny because the Sunday school's taught in English except when there's something hard to understand, and then then it switches. Yeah.
And also that the problem with that is if you are outsourcing someone from another culture,
Yes.
thinking that I ticked already these boxes. Can speak English? Check. With passport? Check. And with the degree? Check. But that's it. But there's no cultural immersion.
That's right.
With the place where he's going to, and then he brings about the culture that he has and mess up the church. Now the church has multiple cultures fighting inside.
Yeah. I always. Okay, I can start now. I'm always concerned when a church is doing the cross-cultural move. Not that they shouldn't, whether it's getting a minister from a different culture, but let's do these things consciously, and let's know this is not easy work.
Yes.
It's never. I mean, it's hard enough when people who grew up in the same culture to understand each other. So communication becomes critical for every step of the way, and finding ways to communicate. How do I explain that I don't understand what's going on around me? Who wants to confess that? But sometimes that's exactly where you are,
I'm
right?
the leader here. I should not be,
That's
I
right.
should not look like weak.
That's right. Yeah, it's okay to look weak, but yeah, exactly.
But this is the thing that we
I'm sorry.
are looking at how with this hiring process that we're doing right now. I don't know if we've done this selection criteria already. I mean, with detail the need of the church, I guess, and with him as a pastor as well. I think what he would expect
Yeah,
here.
Yeah.
We go both ways
yeah,
because with to ask him what are his expectations, something like that, what the
Uh-huh.
expectation of the church to, right? So to come to a common ground,
Yeah.
you can be able to be effectively
Well,
minister in the church.
The one thing I tell churches to watch for, and this is again true for other organizations, fit. The fit must be good. And you can do some things to at least guarantee that the fit is possible. Yeah. Asking the right kinds of questions, Um, when there is misunderstanding, probing a little deeper under to say, why is it we misunderstood each other? What was the missing information or perspective that was there? So the thing, fit is critical, and in order to do fit well, churches often assume that they're ready to hire somebody when they've not even asked the very basic question, who are we? You've got to answer the who are we question,
Right.
or it's really hard to say. I'm working with a church in Regina right now, and we're answering the who are we question. And then I said, okay, when you guys get ready to draw your job description, the minister that you want to call will continue this good work that's already started. If this minister is intent on starting something totally different, that's not a fit, folks. That's a fight.
And it could be very traumatic for both.
For both parties, yeah.
And the sad thing with that traumatic experience, the church learns to accept the trauma,
Yeah.
and they start to think that this trauma is the norm,
Yeah.
and
No.
it's okay to continue. Like, oh, the next round, as they look for another,
Mhm.
they will go through the same trauma, and they feel like it's normal,
Mhm.
but actually it's not.
It's not normal. Although it's harder than it used to be, because we used to expect to hire somebody who kind of looked like us. That's not necessarily a given. Yeah, given the world we're living in. I want to share with you, these are the things the church has to do it well. Again, I didn't know where, this is not intentional in terms of any search process. This is just general thriving and transition kind of stuff. I'm just phrased it up a level to talk about church life instead of your own personal life. Structure of the process. When you're calling a new minister, you need to actually have kind of structured the whole thing out. What's going to happen when? For example, you're going to figure out what to do with the folks who applied that you're not inviting. Are you going to send them a letter saying thank you for applying, but we're moving on with other candidates? Or are you going to just leave them hanging out there? Which is the normal, and it's not a good normal. It's not a good normal. And then I'm working with a church in Regina right now, and basically we've done a year of transition with them. And they've come to the point where they are absolutely certain, their elders are certain, and the transition team is certain, now is not the time to call. We've got to take care of some internal processes first. So I am transitioning out of the transition. You saw what I did there? I'm transitioning out of the transition team leader because they don't need a transition right now. They need an interim perhaps, but they don't need a transition. So, but these are the things that, how do you find candidates? By the way, if you settle with just the people you know, you're going to have a small candidate pool. Quit that. Throw your net out broad. But once you've done your congregational survey, you kind of know what you're looking for. So research the candidates, visit semi. By the way, this is one that churches don't do. If you're going to call somebody who's already serving another church, if you're going to see if they're interested, go visit them on their location. See if they're actually functioning where they are.
Yeah.
Does this make sense? It's expensive, so most of us say, we can afford. No, do this. So, make your short list. Let me keep us moving. Everybody get that?
But it's expensive for us to go back to the Philippines and check him out there.
Yeah, I'm sure
Since I have it for a
we can
month
get
and I'll let it
volunteers.
go.
Yeah,
We can get volunteers to go back home, right? Can't we? Yeah. Final, again, here's just some steps to go through final interview session. How are you going to do the interview? Churches are really bad about just having a person show up, preach a Sunday morning, and then just pulling the church at whether they liked them or not. Anybody can pull a home run one Sunday, and nobody's going to do their bad sermon on that Sunday, right?
Best foot forward.
Best foot forward, but the congregation's also doing that too. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a first date. It's not very real, but it feels good. All right. Invitation, negotiation, closures with other candidates, entry and startup, and then you go through that. But it's actually more work on the part of the church than it is on the candidate to get this thing right. And if you don't have anybody that's got HR background in your church, you don't think of doing this. And so having something like this as a map for how to navigate the transition. So again, I've got a ton of information.